The iron gates of Ashcombe House opened slowly, without welcome. Clara Fenwick stood in the road with one small case in her hand and watched them move apart. Beyond them stretched a long gravel drive bordered by bare-limbed trees. At the far end stood the largest house she had ever seen. Gray stone, tall windows, 4 chimneys, and not one curtain moving. For a moment, Clara wondered whether she had come to the wrong place. Then the elderly gatekeeper looked down at the paper she carried. "Miss Fenwick?" "Yes. You're the reader." Clara nodded. His eyes lingered on her face for a second too long, not with interest. With recognition, or perhaps fear. She could not tell. The gatekeeper stepped aside. "You're expected." Clara began walking. She had been told very little about the position. Lord Gideon Ashcombe was 73 years old, almost completely blind and disliked strangers. His previous reader had died unexpectedly 2 weeks earlier. He required someone with a clear voice, good education, and enough sense not to repeat whatever she heard inside the house. The last part had been underlined twice in the letter. Clara had accepted anyway. She had been outside St. Winifred's Children's Home for 11 months, and was learning quickly that freedom cost money. A room cost money. Bread cost money. Coal cost money. Even being poor seemed to require a regular income. The 14 days of work at Ashcombe House would pay more than Clara usually earned in 3 months. That alone made the strange conditions worth enduring. At least, she hoped they did. A woman in a black dress opened the front door before Clara could knock. "You're late." Clara looked at the clock in the entrance hall. It showed 2 minutes before 9. "I was told 9. The woman looked at the clock, then back at Clara. "Lord Ashcombe considers arriving on time a form of lateness." Clara almost smiled. "That sounds exhausting." The woman stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of her mouth moved. "I am Mrs. Wren, housekeeper. Clara Fenwick." Clara offered her hand. Mrs. Wren did not take it. Instead, she turned. "This way." Clara followed her across the marble floor. The entrance hall smelled of beeswax, old wood, and something faintly medicinal. Portraits lined the walls. Generations of Ashcombes stared down from elaborate golden frames. Clara tried not to stare back. Halfway down the corridor, a maid approached carrying folded linen. Clara stepped aside. "Good morning." The maid stopped. The linen nearly slipped from her hands. Clara frowned. The maid was elderly, perhaps 60, with a round face and watery blue eyes. She stared directly at Clara, not at her dress, not at her case, at her mouth. "Good morning," Clara repeated. The woman went pale. Mrs. Wren turned sharply. "Mrs. Hale?" The maid seemed to remember herself. "Forgive me." She hurried away. Clara watched her go. "What was that?" Mrs. Wren continued walking. "Old servants see ghosts everywhere." Clara gave a small laugh. Mrs. Wren did not. If you enjoy stories where one small mystery slowly opens into something much larger, subscribe to Nightfall Tales and stay with Clara, because before these 14 days are over, the one thing she has always believed about herself will become the one thing she can no longer trust. At the end of the corridor, Mrs. Wren stopped before a pair of dark wooden doors. "Lord Ashcombe does not like sympathy. I wasn't planning to offer any. He dislikes being interrupted. I dislike being shouted at." Mrs. Wren looked at her. Clara shrugged. "You are warning me about him. I thought it fair to warn you about me." This time Mrs. Wren almost smiled again. Then she knocked. A voice from inside said, "If you intend to come in. Knocking afterward seems unnecessary." Mrs. Wren opened the door. Clara entered. Lord Gideon Ashcombe sat beside a tall window. He wore a dark waistcoat, silver watch chain, and black spectacles. His white hair was neatly combed. One hand rested on the head of a cane. He looked nothing like the helpless old man Clara had imagined. Even sitting down, he somehow filled the room. On the table beside him were 7 letters, 3 newspapers, 2 books, and a bell. He did not turn toward her. "You walk lightly." Clara stopped. "So I've been told." "Who told you?" "Nobody important." "Then why remember it?" Clara glanced at Mrs. Wren. The housekeeper gave her no help. Lord Ashcombe tapped one finger against his cane. "Your name?" "Clara Fenwick." "How old?" 19. "Education?" "Enough." His head tilted. That was not the question. It was the useful answer. Silence. Mrs. Wren inhaled quietly. Lord Ashcombe slowly turned his face toward Clara. "You answer quickly." "I was told you dislike delays." For 3 seconds nothing happened. Then the old man gave one quiet laugh. Mrs. Wren looked more surprised by that than Clara expected. Lord Ashcombe pointed toward the chair opposite him. "Sit." Clara sat. He slid the first letter across the table. "Read." Clara opened it. It was a legal letter concerning a disputed boundary between 2 farms. The sentences were long enough to require a map and dull enough to require prayer. Clara read every word. Lord Ashcombe interrupted twice. Again. She repeated the lines. Then he gave her another letter. A business account. Then a newspaper article. Then an obituary. Then a page of French. Clara managed the French poorly. Lord Ashcombe corrected her pronunciation. "You murder that language." It began the fight. His fingers stopped moving. Clara looked up. Something had changed. Not much. Just enough. Lord Ashcombe was listening differently now. He pushed another paper toward her. A handwritten note. Clara leaned closer. The handwriting was dreadful. She read the first line, stopped at the second and frowned. Whoever wrote this letter should apologize to the alphabet. Lord Ashcombe's hand tightened around his cane. Clara glanced up. "Did I say something wrong?" "No." His answer came too quickly. She tried again. The third word might be regarding, or regretting, possibly rabbits. Regretting. Then the man should regret his handwriting first. Again, that tiny change. A stiffening around his mouth. He reached out suddenly. "Give me the paper." Clara placed it in his hand. He ran his fingers along the edge even though he could not see the words. "Who taught you to say things like that?" Clara blinked. "Like what?" "That. I don't understand." Lord Ashcombe sat back. "Continue." She did. But now Clara noticed something uncomfortable. Every time she spoke, the old man seemed less interested in what she was reading than in how she was reading it. After the 4th document, he asked, "Where were you educated?" "St. Winifred's." "The school?" "The children's home." A pause. "You were an orphan?" "I still am, unless someone has made a remarkable discovery this morning." Lord Ashcombe did not smile. "How long were you there?" "As long as I remember." "That is not what I asked." Clara looked at him. Mrs. Wren had warned her that he was difficult. She had not mentioned that he turned every ordinary answer into an examination. "I arrived when I was small." "How small?" 4, perhaps. "Perhaps?" They guessed. Lord Ashcombe went still. Clara watched him. "What?" "Nothing." "You keep saying that when something clearly is not nothing." His mouth tightened. "Read the newspaper." Clara picked it up. For the next 20 minutes he asked no questions. But the room had changed. She could feel it. At noon, Mrs. Wren brought lunch. Clara expected to be dismissed. Instead, Lord Ashcombe said, "She stays." Mrs. Wren hesitated. "For lunch?" "For the employment." Clara stared. "You were considering dismissing me?" "I consider dismissing everyone." "That must make Christmas difficult." Mrs. Wren coughed into her hand. Lord Ashcombe turned toward the sound. "Was that amusement?" "No, my lord." It sounded suspiciously like amusement. Clara bit the inside of her cheek. For the first time, she thought perhaps the old man was not entirely unbearable. Then he ruined it. "Tomorrow, bring proof of your age." Clara's smile disappeared. "I don't have any." "Everyone has proof of age." Orphans don't always arrive with paperwork tucked neatly into their pockets. Lord Ashcombe's fingers tapped once against the table. Then bring whatever the home gave you. Clara's irritation sharpened. You hired me to read. Yes. Then why do you care when I was born? He did not answer. That bothered her more than an insult would have. After lunch, he handed her a novel. Not a legal document. Not a newspaper. A children's adventure book. Clara looked at the faded cover. You read this? My daughter did. It was the first time he had mentioned her. Clara opened the book. Where is she now? Lord Ashcombe's face hardened. Read. Clara understood. The subject was closed. She began. The story was about a boy who believed the moon followed him through a forest. It was badly written but strangely charming. Halfway down the page, Clara read, and the boy looked through the branches and saw the moon smiling above the trees. She stopped. Something felt wrong. Lord Ashcombe waited. Clara frowned at the page. Then, without thinking, she added softly, and the moon was lying. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara looked down. Those words were not printed there. Lord Ashcombe's breathing changed. Why did you say that? I don't know. You read it from the page. No. Then where did you read it? I didn't. He leaned forward. Say it again. Clara felt foolish. And the moon was lying. Lord Ashcombe stood so suddenly that his knee struck the table. The book slid from Clara's hands. Mrs. Wren moved forward. My lord, leave us! Mrs. Wren hesitated. Now. She left. Clara remained seated. The old man stood gripping the table. Who told you those words? No one. That is impossible. I agree. He turned toward her voice. My daughter used to say them. Clara stared. What? She hated that book. His voice had changed. The irritation was gone. In its place was something much worse. Fear. She said the ending was foolish. Every time she read that page, she added the same sentence. Clara looked down at the book. I've never seen this before. I know. How? It belonged to her. Clara felt cold. Lord Ashcombe sat slowly. For the first time since she entered the room, he looked old. Not weak. Old. As though something had reached across many years and touched him. He asked, Did anyone at St. Winifred's know a woman named Eleanor? Clara searched her memory. No. Think. I am. Nurse, visitor, teacher? No. Lord Ashcombe rubbed his thumb along the top of his cane. Clara asked quietly, Was Eleanor your daughter? Yes. What happened to her? He did not answer at first. Then, she left this house 19 years ago. Clara swallowed. And I never heard her voice again. The words settled between them. Clara looked at the book, then at the blind man. It was just a sentence. Yes, I may have heard it somewhere. Yes, but you don't believe that. No. Clara stood. I think I should leave. Lord Ashcombe's face turned toward her immediately. Why? Because you are looking for something in me that I don't understand. I am not looking at anything. The words were sharper than he intended. Clara regretted hers instantly. He was blind. I didn't mean... I know what you meant. He stood too. For several seconds neither spoke. Then he said, Laugh. Clara stared at him. I beg your pardon? Laugh. No. Why not? Because people who are commanded to laugh usually have excellent reason not to. Lord Ashcombe almost smiled. There. What? That. What did I do now? The way you ended the sentence. Clara backed toward the door. This is absurd. Perhaps. You don't know me. No. You heard one strange sentence. 2. Clara stopped. What is the second? Lord Ashcombe said quietly. Your laugh. She had not realized she had laughed. When? This morning. Clara felt the hair rise along her arms. Lord Ashcombe gripped his cane. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Why do you sound like my daughter?" Clara did not answer. She could not. After a long silence, she said, "You told me she disappeared 19 years ago." "Yes, I am 19. That seemed to strike him differently. Not because it answered anything, because it created another question. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Lord Ashcombe asked, "When is your birthday?" Clara gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. "I don't know." He turned sharply toward her. "What?" "The home chose one for me. You don't know when you were born?" "No." The old man sat again, very slowly. Clara wished she had not told him, because something about the answer seemed to frighten him. Eventually he asked, "What do you remember before St. Winifred's?" Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. The question should have been easy. It wasn't. There were pieces, nothing whole. A room, warm hands, a wooden object beside her pillow, someone singing. But every time Clara tried to reach further, the memories seemed to move away from her. Almost nothing. Lord Ashcombe nodded. "Go home." Clara frowned. "You're dismissing me?" "No." "Then, come back tomorrow." She picked up her case. At the door, his voice stopped her. "Miss Fenwick." Clara turned. "Yes?" "Bring me anything you had before the orphanage." Clara's hand tightened around the handle. "There is only one thing." "What?" "A toy." "What kind?" Clara hesitated. "A wooden horse." Lord Ashcombe did not move, but Clara saw his fingers tighten so hard around the cane that his knuckles became white. She stared at him. "Why?" He took several seconds before answering. "Bring it tomorrow." Clara left the room with more questions than she had entered with. Behind her, Lord Gideon Ashcombe sat completely still. He waited until he heard the front door close downstairs. Then he reached for the bell. Mrs. Wren entered moments later. He asked only one question. "Do you remember the toys Eleanor used to carve?" Mrs. Wren stopped breathing for a moment. "Yes, my lord." Gideon's face turned toward the empty doorway. "So do I." Clara did not sleep well. The wooden horse sat on the table beside her bed. She had seen it every day for as long as she could remember. Yet that night it seemed unfamiliar. It was small enough to fit in one hand. The wood had darkened with age. One ear was slightly chipped. The left front leg was shorter than the others, so the horse leaned whenever Clara placed it on a flat surface. She had always thought the imperfections made it charming. Now she wondered whether they meant something. At St. Winifred's, the sisters had told her that the toy had been with her when she arrived. Nothing else. No letter. No family name they could verify. No birth record. Just a frightened little girl, a wool coat, and a wooden horse. Clara picked it up. She turned it over. There, beneath its belly, was the tiny carved letter she had never paid much attention to. E. For the first time in years, Clara whispered, "Who were you?" The horse, predictably, offered nothing. By 8 the next morning, she was standing outside Ashcombe House. Mrs. Wren opened the door before Clara knocked. "You brought it?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you, too." Mrs. Wren glanced at the small bundle under Clara's arm. "His lordship has asked about it 3 times. He could have slept instead." Mrs. Wren lowered her voice. "I don't believe he did." That silenced Clara. They crossed the entrance hall. Mrs. Hale, the elderly maid who had reacted strangely to Clara's voice the previous day, was polishing a table. When she noticed Clara, she stopped. Again. This time Clara stopped too. "Have we met?" Mrs. Hale's hand tightened around the cloth. "No." "Then why do you look at me like that?" The woman glanced toward Mrs. Wren. "I don't." "You do," Mrs. Wren said firmly. "Clara." But Clara did not move. Mrs. Hale finally answered. "You don't look like her." Clara's stomach tightened. "Like who?" The maid immediately looked down. I shouldn't have said anything. Eleanor? Mrs. Hale's face confirmed it before her mouth did. Clara stepped closer. You knew her. I served here when she was a girl. And I sound like her? Mrs. Hale swallowed. Sometimes. That was worse than hearing it from Gideon, because Gideon had lost a daughter. Grief could make a person hear what they wanted to hear. Mrs. Hale had no such reason. Clara asked, was her voice exactly like mine? No. The answer came quickly. Clara almost felt relieved. Then Mrs. Hale added, it isn't the voice itself. What is it? The little things. Clara waited. The way you lift certain words. The way you sound annoyed before you actually become annoyed. Mrs. Wren interrupted. That is enough. Mrs. Hale looked grateful. She returned to polishing the same part of the table. Clara followed Mrs. Wren down the corridor, but the words followed too. The little things. Lord Gideon was waiting in the study. No newspapers today. No legal documents. Only an empty table. Clara placed the wrapped horse upon it. You wanted this. Gideon's face turned toward the sound. Come closer. She did. He held out his hand. Clara hesitated before placing the horse in his palm. The moment his fingers touched it, his expression changed. He traced the back, the head, the uneven legs. Then his thumb stopped beneath the belly. He found the carved E. His breathing became shallow. Where did you get this? I told you. It came with me to St. Winifred's. Who said that? Sister Margaret. Is she alive? Yes. Then we speak to her today. Clara frowned. Today? Yes. You don't waste time. I've wasted 19 years. The answer was so quiet, Clara almost missed it. She looked at him differently. Gideon continued turning the horse in his hands. My daughter made this. Clara had expected him to say something strange. She had not expected that. You're certain? Yes. How? She made dozens. For children? For herself at first. His thumb moved across the uneven front leg. She was terrible at carving legs. Despite herself, Clara smiled. Gideon noticed. When she was 12, she decided she could make animals better than I could. Could she? No. Perhaps that's why she stopped speaking to you. For one moment, Gideon looked offended. Then he laughed. The laugh vanished almost immediately. She carved the letter E beneath everything. Clara stared at the toy. So Eleanor gave this to me? I did not say that. But it belonged to her. Yes. And somehow it came with me to an orphanage. Yes. Neither of them finished the thought. Clara was grateful, because she did not yet know what the thought meant. Gideon called for the carriage. St. Winifred stood nearly 2 hours away. Clara had not returned since leaving 11 months earlier. She had imagined going back one day when she had enough money to look successful. Instead, she returned in Lord Ashcombe's carriage beside the blind father of a woman she had never met. Sister Margaret was 70 now. She embraced Clara at the door. You've become thinner. Good to see you too. You always needed feeding. Then Sister Margaret saw Gideon. Her expression changed. Lord Ashcombe. Gideon's head lifted. You know me. By reputation. Clara noticed the hesitation. So did Gideon. They were taken into a small office lined with ledgers. Clara explained why they had come. Not everything. Only that they wished to see the record of her arrival. Sister Margaret became unusually quiet. She brought down a heavy book. The leather cover cracked when she opened it. She turned pages slowly, then stopped. Here. Clara leaned forward. The entry was simple. October 3rd. Female child. Estimated age, 4 years. Name given, Clara Fenwick. No known parents. Delivered by hired coach. Clara read it twice. Then her eyes moved lower. There was another note. Child repeatedly asks for Nell. Clara's skin prickled. Gideon asked, "What does it say?" She did not answer immediately. Clara? She read the note aloud. Gideon went completely silent. Sister Margaret looked from him to Clara. Clara asked, "Who is Nell?" Gideon spoke without moving. "Eleanor." Clara stared. "What?" "My wife called her Nell when she was young." Clara felt suddenly trapped in the small room. She looked back at the ledger. "I could have known another Nell." "Yes, you say that as though you don't believe it." "I say it because it is true." Clara hated how calm he sounded. Sister Margaret spoke carefully. "You were very ill when you arrived." Clara turned. "What kind of illness?" "Fever." "How long?" "Nearly 3 weeks." "Did I speak?" "Sometimes." "What did I say?" The older woman lowered her eyes. "Mostly the same word." "Nell?" "Yes." Clara sat down. A memory stirred somewhere deep inside her. Not a face, not even a room, just the feeling of calling for someone who did not come. She pushed it away. "Who brought me here?" Sister Margaret pointed to the entry. "A coachman." "Name?" He gave one. "I don't know if it was real." She turned several pages to a receipt. "Thomas Rook." Gideon said, "Find him." Sister Margaret shook her head. "That was 19 years ago." "People do occasionally survive 19 years." Clara glanced at him. "Not everyone is as stubborn as you." He ignored her. Sister Margaret smiled faintly. Then Clara noticed something else in the ledger. "My birthday." "What about it?" Gideon asked. "It isn't here." "No." Clara looked at Sister Margaret. "You told me my birthday was March 12th. We chose it." Clara already knew that, but hearing it now felt different. "So I might not be 19. You could be. Or 20. "Yes." Gideon's hand tightened around his cane. Clara noticed. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Turn every answer into another reason to stare at me. I am blind." "You manage remarkably well." Sister Margaret pretended to be interested in the ledger. Clara stood and walked toward the window. Everything about herself that had once seemed solid was becoming an estimate. Her age, her name, her birthday, even the first years of her life. She turned. "Was Fenwick my real surname?" Sister Margaret hesitated. "It was the name the coachman gave us." "Did he say where he found me?" "No." "Did he know me?" "He said very little." "Then why did you trust the name?" "We had nothing else." Gideon asked, "Was there anything besides the toy?" Sister Margaret thought. "The coat." Clara turned back. "What coat?" "The one you arrived in." Clara had forgotten about it completely. "Do you still have it?" "Possibly." The old storeroom smelled of dust and cedar. Boxes from former children had been kept for decades. Sister Margaret found Clara's beneath a stack of winter blankets. Inside was a small brown wool coat. Too tiny now to fit even one of Clara's arms. She picked it up. Something about it made her chest hurt. Not memory exactly. Recognition without explanation. Gideon asked, "What is it?" "The coat." "Describe it." "Brown wool. 2 wooden buttons. Torn lining." Clara turned it over. Her finger caught on a rough stitch inside the collar. She pulled gently. A small piece of thread came loose. Then she saw letters beneath it. Someone had sewn initials into the lining. Not CF, EV. Clara stared. Gideon heard her breathing change. "What?" "Initials." "Which?" "EV." Gideon's face hardened. Eleanor's middle name was Victoria. Clara felt the room tilt slightly. The horse. The word Nell. Now the coat. 3 things. Still no answer. Only direction. They returned to Ashcombe House after sunset. During the carriage ride, Clara said little. Gideon did not pressure her. That almost made it worse. At dinner, Clara finally spoke. "Tell me what happened when Eleanor left." Gideon put down his fork. "I already told you." "No, you told me she disappeared." "That is what happened. It is not the same thing." He remained silent. Clara continued. "Did she run away?" I believed she did. With someone? A pause. Yes. Who? A clerk named Matthew Vale. The surname meant nothing to Clara, yet something about it caught. Did you dislike him? Very much. Why? He was poor. Clara raised an eyebrow. That cannot have been his greatest crime. No. Gideon's voice hardened. He convinced Eleanor that men I had trusted for years were stealing from estate accounts. Were they? I don't know. You never checked? The silence answered. Clara stared at him. You thought your daughter was lying? I thought she was young. That is not the same thing. I know that now. For the first time, Gideon sounded ashamed. Clara softened slightly. What did you say to her? His jaw tightened. For several seconds she thought he would refuse. Then, I told her that if she chose Matthew Vale over this family, she should not return. Clara looked down at her plate. And she didn't. No. Did you search? Everywhere. How long? 19 years. That ended the conversation. The next morning Clara was reading again. Not because either of them believed the reading mattered anymore, but because routine was easier than admitting what they were investigating. Gideon had chosen another of Eleanor's childhood books. Clara read slowly. Halfway through, she stopped. There was a picture of a fox beneath a tree. Something pressed against the edge of her memory. A woman's hand turning the page. Warm light. A voice saying, Clara whispered, "Wake up, old bear." Gideon's head snapped toward her. What did you say? Clara looked at the page. The words were not there. I don't know. You do. No. Say it again. Clara closed the book. I said, wake up, old bear. Gideon's face drained of color. Clara's pulse quickened. What? He did not answer. Gideon. It was the first time she had used his name without title. He seemed not to notice. When Eleanor was 6, she used to wake me like that. Clara stood. This has to stop. What? These little discoveries. You think I am creating them? I don't know what I think. She walked toward the window. I have spent my whole life knowing almost nothing about where I came from. I made peace with that. Did you? Clara turned angrily. Yes. No one makes peace with an unanswered question. They simply learn where not to look. She stared at him. The old man understood that too well. Clara's anger weakened. Then came a knock. Mrs. Wren entered. There is a gentleman downstairs asking for Miss Fenwick. Clara frowned. Who? He says his name is Mr. Daniel Mercer. I don't know him. Mrs. Wren held out an envelope. He says he has information concerning your childhood. Clara's heartbeat quickened. Gideon said, Bring him. A thin man in his late 50s entered 5 minutes later. He carried an old leather case. He looked nervous. Too nervous. I was told Miss Fenwick had begun asking questions at St. Winifred's. Clara stared. How did you hear that? My sister works there. He opened the case. I thought you should see this. He removed a folded sheet of paper. Clara took it. It was an old rental record. A cottage in Belhaven. Tenant, Eleanor Vale. Clara looked up sharply. Gideon said, Read it. She did. His face tightened. Eleanor had not vanished immediately. She had lived, under Matthew Vale's surname, for at least 6 years after leaving Ashcombe House. Clara looked at the date. Then she saw another name written beneath Eleanor's. Lydia Fenwick, her own surname. Clara stopped breathing. Who was she? Mr. Mercer shook his head. I don't know, Gideon asked. Was she related to Eleanor? I can't say. Clara stared at the two names. Eleanor Vale. Lydia Fenwick. 2 women living in the same cottage. One of them connected to her somehow. Maybe both. For the first time, the most obvious explanation became less certain. Perhaps Eleanor had not been Clara's mother. Perhaps Clara belonged to Lydia Fenwick. Perhaps Eleanor had simply cared for her, Perhaps that explained the voice, the stories, the horse, the song. It explained enough to be believable. But not everything. Clara folded the paper. Where is the cottage? Mr. Mercer gave her the address. They went the following morning. The house had been empty for years. Its front door was green. Clara stopped at the gate. Gideon heard her footsteps cease. What is it? Clara's mouth had gone dry. The door. What about it? She could barely say the words. I know it. Gideon did not speak. Clara walked inside. Dust covered everything. The kitchen was almost bare. Yet before entering the next room, she pointed left. There should be stairs there. There were. She climbed them. Third step. It creaked. Clara stopped. She knew that sound. Not because she remembered hearing it yesterday. Because some part of her had been waiting 19 years to hear it again. At the top was a small room overlooking the garden. Clara walked to the window. Her fingers touched the wooden frame. Something had been scratched into it. Small lines. Height marks. Beside each one was a letter. C.
C. C.
And beside the highest mark, in faded handwriting, My little lark is getting too tall. Gideon reached the room with Mrs. Wren guiding him. Clara could not speak. She pointed uselessly at the wall. Mrs. Wren read the sentence aloud. Gideon's face changed. He asked, "Whose handwriting?" Mrs. Wren stepped closer, then whispered, "Miss Eleanor's." Clara stared at the words. Eleanor had measured her height. Eleanor had called her little lark. Eleanor had lived in this house. But Lydia Fenwick had lived here too. Clara touched the highest mark. She could feel another memory pressing at the edges. A woman laughing. A hand above her head. Someone saying, "Stand still." Clara closed her eyes. For 1 second she almost saw a face. Then it vanished. Behind them, Mr. Mercer cleared his throat. "There is one more person you should speak to." Clara turned. "Who?" "A midwife," Gideon asked. "Name?" "Mrs. Agnes Cole." "Does she remember Eleanor?" Mr. Mercer hesitated. "She remembers both women." They found Mrs. Cole that afternoon. She was 82 and nearly deaf, but her mind was sharp. Clara sat opposite her. On the table lay the rental paper. Eleanor Vale, Lydia Fenwick. Clara's hands were trembling. Mrs. Cole studied her for a long time. Then she whispered, "You have changed." Clara's heart stopped. "You know me?" "I knew a little girl." Clara leaned forward. "Was Eleanor Vale my mother?" Gideon did not move. Mrs. Wren held her breath. Mrs. Cole looked at Clara carefully. "I knew Eleanor Vale." Clara waited. "And I knew Lydia Fenwick." Clara's voice cracked. "Which one was my mother?" The old woman frowned. "I don't know what name they gave you afterward." Clara felt the room narrow around her. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Cole reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "But when I first saw you..." She paused. "Your name was not Clara." Clara stared at the old midwife. For several seconds, she forgot everyone else in the room. Lord Gideon, Mrs. Wren, Mr. Mercer. Even the sound of the clock behind her seemed to disappear. Only one sentence remained. "Your name was not Clara." Clara slowly withdrew her hand. "What was it?" Mrs. Cole looked toward the window as though the answer might still be hanging somewhere outside. "Anne." Clara said nothing. The name did not feel familiar. That frightened her more than if it had. "Anne what?" "I don't remember a surname." Gideon leaned forward. "How old was she?" Mrs. Cole frowned. "The child?" "Yes. When I first saw her? A baby." Clara swallowed. "You delivered me?" "No." That answer stopped the room again. Mrs. Cole rubbed her fingers together. "I came afterward. The mother was already recovering." "Which mother?" Clara could hear the strain in her own voice. Mrs. Cole's eyes moved toward the rental paper on the table. Eleanor was there. Clara's breathing quickened. "So was Lydia," Gideon said quietly. Which one had given birth? Mrs. Cole shook her head. I cannot swear to something after 19 years simply because you want certainty. It was not the answer anyone wanted, but Clara respected it. Mrs. Cole continued. I remember Eleanor weak in bed. I remember Lydia carrying the baby. I remember an argument about whether the child should remain in that house. Clara's eyes narrowed. An argument between them? No. Then with whom? I never saw the man clearly. That created another question. What did he want? Mrs. Cole looked uneasy. He said the child would bring trouble. Gideon's face hardened. What kind of trouble? I was never told. Clara stood. So I came all this way to learn that I had another name, and possibly another problem. Mrs. Cole looked almost offended. You also learned that someone wanted you gone. Clara stopped. That mattered, perhaps more than the name. As they returned to Ashcombe House, Clara said very little. The road seemed longer than before. Anne. She tried the name silently. Anne. Nothing. No memory. No feeling. Just emptiness. At dinner, Gideon finally said, You don't have to continue. Clara looked up. Continue what? This. The search. Yes. She gave a bitter laugh. You mean now that we have discovered my name wasn't mine, my birthday wasn't mine, and the only two women connected to my childhood may not even have been my mother? Gideon said nothing. Clara pushed her plate away. I cannot stop now. He nodded. I hoped you would say that. You are becoming very good at pretending not to manipulate people. I've had practice. That earned the smallest smile from her. The next clue did not come from a dramatic letter. It came from an account book. Mr. Mercer returned the next morning with records belonging to Matthew Vale, Eleanor's husband. Most were ordinary. Rent, coal, bread, ink. Clara almost stopped reading after 20 pages. Then she found a payment made to Mrs. Agnes Cole, the midwife. 2 months before another entry. Cradle repaired. Then, medicine for Eleanor. Then, new shoes for Anne. Clara stopped. Gideon heard it immediately. What? She read the line again. New shoes for Anne. The room grew quiet. Gideon asked, How old would the child have been? Mr. Mercer checked the dates. Perhaps 2. Clara looked at him. Matthew paid for them? Yes. Then Anne lived with Matthew and Eleanor. It appears so. Still, nobody said what all three were thinking. Not yet. Clara continued reading. Several pages later, blue ribbon for Anne. Honey cakes for Anne. Wood for Eleanor's carving. Clara's eyes moved to the wooden horse sitting beside Gideon's chair. She stopped breathing for a moment. The horse was no longer a random object. It belonged inside this life. A life Clara had lived before she could remember it. She turned another page, then another. Finally, a letter had been folded into the account book. It was addressed to Matthew. Clara opened it. The handwriting was Eleanor's. She read aloud. Matthew, Lydia says the little one has begun copying my laugh, which I consider proof that God enjoys tormenting you. Clara stopped. Gideon's hand tightened around his cane. Nobody spoke. Clara stared at the line. The little one has begun copying my laugh. Her own laugh. The one Gideon had recognized. Now there was an explanation. Not proof of blood, but proof of closeness. Clara continued. She follows me everywhere and insists the moon is lying whenever I read that ridiculous book. The paper trembled in Clara's hands. The room seemed to tilt. That phrase, and the moon was lying. She had not invented it. She had heard Eleanor say it, over and over, when she was small enough to forget the woman, but old enough to keep pieces of her. Clara sat down. Gideon whispered, You remembered her? No. You remembered something. Clara pressed her fingers to her forehead. A voice. Can you hear it? Not clearly. She closed her eyes. For a moment there was only darkness, then warmth, a woman's lap, a page turning, laughter near her ear, not a face. Still no face. Clara opened her eyes. She called me something. Gideon leaned forward. What? Clara shook her head. It is there, but I can't reach it. He did not push her. That was the first kindness she noticed. The following day, Lydia Fenwick's role finally became clearer. A parish record identified her as Eleanor's friend and former companion. She had never married. There was no record of Lydia giving birth. That did not prove everything, but it removed one possibility. Clara stared at the paper for a long time. So Lydia was not my mother. Mr. Mercer said carefully, not according to any record we have found. Clara glanced at Gideon. He said nothing. She was grateful. The truth was beginning to form. But it was not yet complete enough to touch. Another letter from Matthew brought them closer. It was unfinished. The final lines had never been signed. Clara read, Eleanor fears someone has learned about Anne. She believes the same men she accused years ago are watching the cottage. I told her we should leave Belhaven, but she refuses to run again. Clara's voice weakened. Gideon asked, What else? She continued. She says if anything happens to us, Lydia is to take our girl somewhere no one would search under the name Vale. Clara stopped. There it was. Our girl. The words were small, almost ordinary. But they changed everything. Gideon slowly lowered his head. Clara did not cry. Not yet. She stared at the page and whispered. Anne was their daughter. No one contradicted her. Mrs. Wren quietly left the room. Clara's fingers tightened around the letter. If Anne was their daughter, Gideon said, we still have to prove Anne was you. Yes. She said it too quickly. Because she needed that final distance. Needed one last uncertainty. If Anne was not Clara, then Clara could still return to the life she understood. But deep down, she already knew. The wooden horse. The song. Nell. The cottage. The height marks. The phrases. The laugh. The wrong birthday. The name change. Too many pieces now pointed in one direction. The question was no longer whether Clara had known Eleanor. The question was, what had happened between knowing her and arriving at St. Winifred's? That answer came from a man no one had expected to find alive. Thomas Rook, the coachman. He was 76 and living with his daughter in a village 12 miles away. When Clara entered his cottage, he looked at her for one long moment. Then he sat down without being asked. I wondered if this day would come. Clara did not sit. You brought me to St. Winifred's. His eyes lowered. Yes. Why? He rubbed both hands over his face. I was told it was temporary. By whom? Miss Fenwick. Lydia. Yes. Clara's throat tightened. Where was Eleanor? Very ill. And Matthew? Dead. Gideon stiffened. Clara asked. How? Rook shook his head. I never knew. Fever, they said. The uncertainty lingered, but Clara had another question. Why did Lydia send me away? She believed men were watching the cottage. The same men Eleanor accused? I believe so. Rook took a breath. Miss Fenwick said no one must know the child was connected to Vale or Ashcombe. Clara finally sat. So she changed my name. Yes. To hers. Yes. And my first name? Rook's eyes softened. She said Anne was too dangerous. Clara whispered. So I became Clara. Yes. Was I frightened? Rook looked at her for a long time. You screamed for 3 miles. Clara's eyes filled. What did I say? He swallowed. You kept calling for Nell. Gideon turned his face away. Clara stared at the floor. The name suddenly hurt. Not because she remembered everything, because now she understood who she had been calling. Rook continued. When I reached the orphanage, you were burning with fever. I thought you might die. Why didn't Lydia come back for me? She tried. Clara looked up. She died 6 weeks later. The answer landed quietly. No villain appearing from a doorway. No grand confession. Just terrible timing. Lydia had hidden Clara to protect her, then died before she could retrieve her. And Eleanor? Rook looked ashamed. She was told the child had been moved somewhere safe. Did she know where? No. Why not? She was too ill when Lydia left. By the time she recovered enough to ask questions, Lydia was dead. Clara closed her eyes. Eleanor had lost her. Not abandoned her. Lost her. Gideon asked, "Did Eleanor search?" Rook's answer came immediately. "For years." Clara opened her eyes. That was the moment the anger she had carried since childhood began to break. Someone had looked for her. Someone had wanted her. Someone had failed to find her because the name had changed. Not Anne Vale. Clara Fenwick. One false name had hidden a child for 19 years. The final proof was discovered 3 days later. Matthew Vale's old papers had been transferred to a solicitor's office after Eleanor's death. Most had been thrown away years ago. One sealed packet remained. It had never been opened. The seal carried the letter E. Clara placed it before Gideon. "You should open it." His hands did not move. "No." "Why?" "Because it was hers." "So?" "So you should." Clara broke the seal. Inside was a birth notice. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. Anne Eleanor Vale. Born to Matthew Vale and Eleanor Vale. Clara read the line twice. Then beneath it she found a tiny handprint in brown ink, and one sentence written by Matthew. "She has her mother's voice already. God help us all." Clara laughed through the tears that finally came. Gideon heard the laugh and covered his mouth. Now there was no uncertainty left. No theory. No possibility. Clara Fenwick had been born Anne Eleanor Vale, Eleanor's daughter, Gideon's granddaughter. But the discovery did not feel like becoming someone else. It felt like finding the beginning of the person she had always been. There was one final letter in the packet, addressed to Gideon. Clara hesitated. "Do you want me to read it?" For several seconds he could not answer. Then, "Yes." Clara unfolded it. "Father," her voice almost failed on the first word. Gideon lowered his head. She continued, "If this reaches you, then perhaps someone finally did what I could not." Clara paused. "Find her." Gideon's hand began trembling. Clara read on. "I have searched under every name I knew. Anne Vale, Anne Wycliffe, the child from Belhaven, the little girl with the wooden horse. Nothing." Clara pressed her lips together. The next line blurred. She wiped her eyes. "If she ever learns my name, tell her I did not leave her." Clara's voice broke. "I lost her." Gideon began crying silently. Clara continued, because Eleanor had waited too long for the words to stop now. "And Father, if by some mercy she reaches you before the truth does, you may recognize her voice." Clara lowered the letter. Nobody spoke. Gideon slowly held out his hand. Clara took it. His fingers closed around hers. "I spent 19 years waiting for my daughter to come back." Clara could barely breathe. Gideon smiled through tears. And when the door finally opened, his grip tightened. "She sent me you." Weeks later, Clara was still at Ashcombe House. Not as an employee. Not exactly. The legal questions about names and inheritance could wait. For once in her life, Clara did not care what papers called her. One afternoon, she sat beside Gideon, with a book open across her knees. He interrupted before she had read the first sentence. "Clara, yes? There is something I never told you. That sounds dangerous." When Eleanor was nervous before reading aloud, she cleared her throat twice. Clara smiled. Because she had just done exactly that. "Does it trouble you?" Gideon was quiet for a moment. "No." He turned his face toward her voice. "It used to hurt. And now?" He smiled. "Now it sounds like someone came home." Clara looked down at the book. For most of her life, She had believed she came from nowhere. Now she knew better. She had been Anne. She had become Clara, and neither name had been a lie. One belonged to the child who had been lost. The other belonged to the girl who survived. Clara cleared her throat twice. Then she began to read.